Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi. Today, I'm very excited because we have a very special guest. It's a one and the only, our famous author, Mark Stover. He has a series of books that he's originally published. He's also on our podcast community team, and he has his own show on our channel. So check him out, Mark Stover. And today, he has a great topic that he wants to share. It has to do with the holidays, and he wants to explain why, God is not always who we expect him to be. And he has a beautiful story he'd like to share. And I can't wait for him to take the stage because you're really going to be inspired when you hear what he has to say. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you here. Like always, I love when you come on. You're very inspirational. You're full of motivation through your talks. And I really enjoy everything you have to share with us. And, so today you wanted to talk about how God is different. And, he's not always who we expect him to be. And you had a story from the passage of from one of the books of the Bible that you wanted to share and the true meaning behind it. So tell us a little about that. And also, for people who haven't seen you before, maybe you can give them a little bit of your background of, your books and what motivated you to write these books.
Okay, yeah, it's great to be here with you again. Always enjoyable. My background, I live in the Midwest. I'm an engineer, and after college, God reached me. I was lost, and He found me. I think maybe we've talked about that before, but and I've been drawn to study the Bible. So I've been studying the Bible for 40 years, and I felt compelled to write something a few years ago, and God directed my path to write a book based on John 5:39, in which Jesus said to the Jewish religious leaders, "You guys search your scriptures, which today we would call the Old Testament.
Hmm.
They didn't back then, but that's what we call it today. There was no New Testament when Jesus said that, although that statement wound up being recorded and put in the New Testament later by John. But he said the Old Testament's all about him. And so I thought, I felt led to write a book studying the Old Testament, a series of 4 books to examine his claim. Is that true? Are they really about him? That's a bold claim. And if they are, then there's implications for that. And if, it's not that strong that they're about the Old Testament is about him, then there are implications for that. So I've been writing these books and God's been blessing them and I've enjoyed writing them. It's been a journey with God. And so I wanted to share a little bit about one of the passage today.
Hmm. So what the passage that you wanted to share today?
It's from Zechariah 9.
Hmm.
Um, but let me preface it by
Okay.
saying it's related to the Christmas story because in the Christmas story, Jesus was born in Bethlehem and he was laid in a manger. And maybe most people know this, but maybe some don't. A manger was just the trough that the animals fed in.
Right.
So you wouldn't put a baby in there. It would be the furthest thing from sanitary, with except for perhaps the garbage dump, would be, would be that. And he was in a stable. So the point is obvious that the King of Kings came and was born, and that's where he was born. So God caught us off guard. That's not if we were writing this story, he would have been born in some magnificent palace
Yeah.
uh, with the best doctor and with trusted advisors present and kings and so forth. He wasn't.
Right.
So similarly, this passage refers to about a week before his execution, but it's the same thing. We're caught off guard by God. This is not what we would have imagined, but it
Right.
was predicted. Uh, this moment was predicted by Zechariah. Zechariah was almost all of the Old Testament was written before the Jews were conquered by Babylon and sent off to exile. But there was a remnant of Jews that came back 70 years later, and a few of the books in the Old Testament were written by those people who returned. They are called the post-exilic
Mhm.
prophets, and Zechariah is one of them. It's one of the last books that was written, and it's one of the last books in the Old Testament because they're not necessarily listed chronologically,
Right.
but his is, and so he wrote out. Can I read the verse?
Of course.
Okay, so this is chapter 9, verse 9. He says, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So that's it. And so he predicted that the king was going to come to Jerusalem, which is and was the capital city of Israel. And the one detail, and he says he's coming, he's humble, and he's coming with salvation, and he's going to ride into the city on a donkey, and not just a donkey, but a colt, a young, I don't know about a baby, but a very young donkey. So
Yeah.
this is a similar thing. This is not the picture. This is not the scenario we would have written
Yeah.
for the King of Kings to enter the capital city on a baby donkey.
Hmm.
It is no one would come up with that. It is you would have him, in movies like Gladiator riding in on a gold chariot, the
Right.
King of Kings, with the crowd throwing rose petals before him, or on the most magnificent horse surrounded by warriors or something like that. But he
Yeah.
comes in on a donkey, on a baby donkey. So, of course, we all know that Jesus did that.
Yes.
He entered Jerusalem on what we call in Christianity Palm Sunday
Hmm.
on a donkey. And so this was a prophecy written by Zechariah, I don't know, 500, 600. I'd have to look it up, years before Jesus came.
Right.
Maybe less, maybe 450, I'm forgetting. And Jesus did. He rode in on a donkey on Palm Sunday, and there was a crowd there, and they were hailing him, and they were waving palm branches. So, and we call that Palm Sunday. But uh, he didn't come in gold. He was wearing his robe,
Right.
which was not new. He did not live he was not a rich man. He did not live a lavish lifestyle in any sense of the word. So he wrote in like that. Now, people will say, okay, Jesus fulfilled this prophecy as well as a whole lot of other prophecies in the Old Testament. And people will commonly then add the caveat. Now, anyone could do this.
Right.
Anyone could buy a donkey or rent a donkey, which is what Jesus did. Maybe they borrowed it and
Yeah.
ride it into the city. Anyone could do that. So yes, he did it, but it doesn't really prove that he was the Messiah because anyone could do that.
Right.
He knew the Bible, and so he did that. But what I think as I study the Bible is that actually, no, it was a little bit more significant than that, because I don't think this was actually predicting the action
Hmm.
so much as it was the deeper meaning behind the action.
Right.
And the deeper meaning was that the King of Kings didn't live like any other king. He lived a poor, humble life, um, rich in love
Yes.
with his friends and with the people he met and who became his friends, and rich in that sense, but poor in any other sense.
Right.
Didn't seek power, didn't acquire power, didn't he did acquire notoriety, whether he wanted to or not. He made quite a splash, but not for the purpose of getting that fame. And so he wasn't like any other king. So I think that's what this prophecy is predicting. So actually, it was quite a prophecy. It was quite a fulfillment. When we think about history, there's people like Mahatma Gandhi, and Abraham Lincoln, who actually lived for the sake of the people, who actually sacrificed and
Right.
lived humbly. But very, very few of them. Most of the people were Julius Caesar,
Yeah.
who, and people like him, great generals, great conquering generals, and of course the despots, the Stalins and the Hitlers and the
Right.
terrible leaders of history. But even the average leaders were, really became famous and rich and all those things.
Yeah.
And today our leaders, I absolutely don't want to get in politics, but we question their motives, right?
Right.
They are getting rich. Certainly people from both parties. That's not exclusive at all. But
Right.
very few people like Abraham Lincoln, who gave everything they had to try to right what was wrong, try to set people free. And so it's actually quite a prophecy to say the Messiah would be that kind of leader, because very few of them have graced history. But
Right.
Jesus certainly was. He certainly was. So I thought that was a good passage to cover.
It is. I think it's a wonderful passage to cover. And, and for you, what does it mean to you that makes it so special that you wanted to share it with the audience today?
Well, I just think that I love the Bible, and I think that passage, I think God catches us off guard
Hmm.
because we don't think like him. He is righteous, and we don't even understand that. It means he's morally perfect, and we're kind of scared of that.
Yeah.
I am, because we're not. I'm not perfect, but and we wonder, is that even a good thing? Because we don't understand it. We've never seen it. But no, actually, it is a good thing. He is good. Um, I think we don't understand God.
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of lies about him in society, about whether he's good or what. Is he a rules focused God? And that doesn't sound good. He's a killjoy. He is violent. Some stories in the Old Testament where he judged people, and and those things get emphasized and brought up and distorted, and they're kind of in the ether of our society, and every society.
Yeah.
And I just think, though, that once you become a Christian and you get to know him,
Hmm.
and you slow down a minute and look at what he's given you and what he wants to do in your life, uh, that we misunderstand him, and he's actually really good. So that's kind of where this comes from. I think about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, and before they fell, I think about before Eve even came along. There was no religion in the Garden of Eden. There were no rituals. There was kind of, you could say, a father and his son.
Yeah.
And that's the relationship they had. There was no God and a human who worshiped him. There was none of that.
Right.
I think about when there was a moment where God and Adam, and then we know that they got together and just spent time with each other and talked to each other every day.
Right.
And there was one day where they got together, very little is recorded, but one event they got together and God brought all the animals he created, who at that time were all peaceful.
Yeah.
And of course, so magnificent as they still are today.
Right.
He brought them all out one by one, and he had Adam name them. And it says, whatever Adam named them, God loved it.
Right.
So I'm picturing a father and a son. In
Hmm.
my mind, and this didn't happen, but in my mind, they're sitting on porch chairs. Um, you know, in my mind, the ones from the 1950s that had those straps that crossed each other, and they're sitting there. Maybe they had a lemonade or something, and something better probably. And he would name it, and I could just see God bringing out a giraffe, and he said, "Well, what's that one?"
Yeah.
Adam said something, and maybe he said something that we get the word giraffe from. I don't know, but God just loved it. And
Right.
just like any father or mother loves their child and what they do. So that was the relationship. It wasn't religious. And yet today, in other religions and in Christianity, it's so full of ritualism
Right.
that sends the message unstated, but it sends a message strongly that this is how we relate to God. We approach him through religious rituals.
Right.
When Jesus came, he was not religious
Mm-hmm.
at all. He had his followers, and what was that like? His closest followers. He lived with them,
Right.
camped with them, and went to places with them, and included them in his mission, and taught them, and ate with them, and did everything with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they just loved him. Peter and at the time of the crucifixion denied Jesus famously 3 times, was absolutely ashamed of himself and felt guilty and just ran out of the temple grounds weeping.
Yeah.
The third time he denied Jesus. Well, when Jesus raised from the dead, I don't know how many days or later it was, but uh, he was standing on the shore, and they didn't know what to do. The disciples. I mean, Jesus died, Then
Yeah.
he raised from the dead, but they didn't know what to do. And so, not long after, they were fishing, because that's what they did before Jesus called them to be his disciples. They're like, well, let's go. I guess we'll go and be fishermen again.
Mm-hmm.
So they were doing that, and they'd been out all night, and they had a rough night. And the resurrected Jesus was on the beach cooking them breakfast. Again, he's just not who we think God is. And he's cooking them breakfast, and they had a bad night. They didn't catch anything, and they're rowing their boat in. And then Peter sees Jesus on the beach, and he jumps out of the boat and runs to him. He's so excited. He loves Jesus so much.
Right.
Jesus was so great to him. And here he had the last encounter they had was terrible. Peter, out of fear, denied Jesus and was so ashamed and felt so bad. But as soon as he saw Jesus, that was all gone. And Jesus dealt with that day and brought it up in a very respectful way and said, let's talk about it. Let's work this through. So that's who Jesus was.
Yeah.
They didn't approach him. He jumped out of a boat in his clothes. He just wanted to touch Jesus and talk to him and be with him again. That's the relationship that people are supposed to have with God, and it's become clouded and
Yeah.
distorted. And so, all this is related. I hope I'm communicating that, but that's what I wanted to talk about today.
I love that. I love that. And for this, now we're coming up to the holiday season, Christmas is coming, you know, what is the main message you want to get across to people with, understanding, the story you had just told and understanding your interpretation of what, God really wants us, to really understand and to and to think and how, maybe ways that we could look at God so we don't misinterpret because everybody has their own interpretations and things do get clouded. You have so many people quoting different passages with different meanings, and it can be very confusing. And for you, how do you not get clouded? How do you understand, what is your way of understanding the Bible and understanding these stories so you're not feeling that you're being misinterpreted, by your readings.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm really glad you asked that. What I do is I pray, and I read the Bible, and it starts to make sense. Sometimes passage and I see things, I'm like, oh my gosh, I see it.
Mm-hmm.
People used to call that a light bulb going off.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes that happens, and I'm I'm pretty sure I'm understanding because he wrote this for everybody. God didn't have this written for theologians only. He wrote it for everybody.
Yeah.
God, God and Jesus demonstrated that he's talked to everybody.
Yes.
He talked to the Romans that were hated by the Jews. There were Roman soldiers there. He would talk to them. He talked to the people that had leprosy that were outcasts.
Right.
He talked to the prostitutes who were social outcasts. He talked to the religious people that wanted to talk to him.
Right.
And he talked to the common man, and he talked to those who were hurting for a variety of reasons. He talked to everybody, and God wrote this book for everybody. And so we can understand it. And so I would say, pray, God, show me what you want me to learn today, but also just read it. Just do that. That's, I think, the best thing you can do. Um, I also read commentaries, and I'll look on the internet, and see what other great scholars said about a passage. And sometimes I come to a passage and I have no idea. I really don't understand what it's saying. I'll pray, and then I immediately pray, God, what does this mean? And sometimes I don't learn the meaning.
Right.
Sometimes I learn the meaning years later.
Right.
Sometimes I learn the meaning shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Um, and for whatever reason, that's when God wants me to learn it. I don't need to know everything right now. I
Right.
need to know something right now. And God will communicate that. So just read the Bible, pray about it. You can talk to people who study the Bible a lot and ask them. You can go on the internet, you can read books, commentaries, and so on, all those things.
Yes.
But I love that you asked me that. I think that's at this holiday season, I think that's the best thing we can do.
Yes.
Read God's book. I wouldn't say anything about, oh, don't, no, have Christmas, buy gifts for your loved ones, enjoy it, put up a Christmas tree. Did they do that in Israel? No. I don't know. Somewhere in Europe, it was, from another religion. That's okay. That's not the way I mean it. It's not the way you mean it. Um, it's just part of a tradition of enjoying the holiday. All those things are fine. I'm not saying cut it back.
Yeah.
You can, but I'm not here to be that voice. But I love what you said. Let's include God in it, and that's a great way to do it, is read the Bible.
Yes, I definitely believe that. I definitely believe that because sometimes, I also think, it gets so materialized that we lose, sometimes people lose the meaning of the true meaning of Christmas. And I think it's great, like you said, we could do the decorations and we could do all that and we can make it joyful because it is a celebration, and every country has their own definition of celebration. But let's not lose fact of what the true meaning of Christmas is.
Yeah,
And I think too is let's teach our children the true meaning of Christmas too, that it's not only about Santa Claus, but it's also about God. And it's
yeah,
also about Jesus, the birth of Jesus, and what that means, and to us as individuals, and what He's done for us, and what He can do for us now, and what He will do for us in the future. And I think that's important that children understand that. And I think especially now they see a drop in the churches, for the younger generation. So I think we need to really communicate on a younger generation's level, in their mind. And I think we need to really, express what the true meaning of Jesus is, and what he can do for us. And it's okay to have your own interpretation. I don't think, I don't think there is one interpretation, and I don't like when people stress that they think, because they interpret a passage in the Bible a certain way, doesn't necessarily mean that it can apply to everybody like that. It might apply to somebody else in a different way. Like you said, pray, and the light bulb may go off. It might go off right then and there. It might go off a week. It might go off a couple of years. It might go off down the road. But eventually, when the time is right, it will go off. And I think we have to keep that in mind and perspective too.
yeah, yeah. I love that, and we have to remember God's part. But I don't want to. But I guess I'm trying to make a pitch to try to break through what society says about him.
Yes,
He's our loving Father.
yes.
To think of him as he is, not as other people put a lot of things on him. And because in our heart we have an aversion to religion.
Hmm.
I do actually, and but that's not God.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I'm saying. But another thing, I think is good to do is the parts where we love people. The Christmas cards doesn't have to be Christmas cards, but maybe as old friends, people that were important to you
Yeah.
throughout your life is calling them, texting them, emailing them, Christmas card, sure,
Yeah.
but remembering people and remembering people in need, praying for people. And I also like, you know, giving to charity,
Yeah.
um, and teaching that to our kids too,
Yeah.
um, buying gloves for the homeless,
Right.
you know, or hats,
Hmm.
giving them to the homeless people, going to a homeless shelter, um, volunteering to, feed people at a homeless shelter, um, giving money to the Salvation Army,
Yeah.
all those things I think is a really good part of Christmas too.
Oh, I definitely think so. I think that's the part I love when I see that. I definitely love, when people stop and they think about others, the people in need, the people who, and I think it's not just, people should make it not just for Christmas, but this should be something that people do all the time.
Yeah,
But, if they want to emphasize it on Christmas, great. But we have to remember too that this is a behavior that we all should try to imply in our daily lives and do it as much as possible, and really lend a handout to others in need all the time. But
yeah.
when we talked about our conversation today, what are some really important things that you'd like to emphasize, especially now because of the holidays coming? What are some things you really like to make people understand from our conversation?
Okay. Well, I tell you, the one thing I didn't really bring up
Mm-hmm.
is that Jesus came, he's coming back. He said that at the end of time, but he came the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is all about what he did on the cross.
Right.
Uh, and I didn't mention that, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
The idea is that God loves us so much that he wants the way it was with Adam and then Adam and Eve,
Right.
the way it was with when he was with them is the way it will be one day.
Right.
But for that to happen, the real wrong that has been done in history
Mm-hmm.
and the real wrong that I have done,
Mm-hmm.
I have said awful things to people and done shameful things and so on and so forth. And it's really not right, but that there has to be a justice for that. And God is very loving and he's also just. And there
Right.
has to be justice and there will be. And so what Jesus did was he paid the price of justice for me on the cross so that one day I can be his son with him like Adam was.
Right.
So I didn't say that today, and I really need to. I mean, that's really Easter is really the big one.
Yeah.
Christmas is great, and is I mean, you can't compare him. I mean, he had to come, and
Yeah.
that's what Christmas is. And then, but he came to do what he did
Yes.
on Easter, and that's so that's really the message of Jesus is that he loves us, but there had to be justice, but he paid it for us.
Yes.
And then he doesn't force it on anyone, but he
Right.
offers it to everyone. Do you want this forgiveness? He's offering it with a huge smile,
Yeah.
a real smile, sincere. I
Right.
love you. Do you want this? Say yes, and you will be with me in eternity. And if you want, you can say no, or you can ignore it. And then you'll pay the price for justice, but justice will be paid. So I didn't really say that, but that's that's important.
I love it. I love it. Now tell everybody about your books because you have a series of 4 books out right now, and you have one that you're working on that will probably be out next year or so. But
Yeah.
tell us a little about the books that you've just previously written over the last couple of years that have had a huge impact on a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, they have been selling, and we've. I actually don't know a lot of Jewish people, but we've given them to our Jewish friends, and there have been some coincidences too. We would pray, and we've been praying. And I have the books priced low. I'm not doing this to make money. Um, God's blessed us with my career went just fine,
Right.
but we're trying to get this message out, which I believe is God's message. And so that's what our prayer is. God, please get this in the hands of people you want it to be in. And it's good. These books are good for Christians too, who
Yes.
because they're about the Old Testament, and a lot of churches don't focus on the Old Testament. So the Old
Right.
Testament is beautiful and it's important. So it's for Christians too, but mainly it was written for Jewish people to, and I explained that earlier in our talk. But we've prayed, God, please get this in the hands of who you want it to be.
Yes.
And after we've prayed, like my wife would just met a Jewish person out of the blue, didn't know he was Jewish, and gave him the book
Yes.
because he had given her a book.
Hmm.
And it was a doctor. And I said, well, hey, give him my book.
Right.
And it turned out he was Jewish. So, that was that doctor's appointment was the day after we prayed for the book to get in the hands of Jewish people in a prayer meeting.
Yeah.
And so that's what's, it's all about. And it's not for every Jewish person. A lot of Jewish people aren't interested, and that's their choice. But some
Right.
Jewish people are curious.
Hmm.
And so this book is for them. And I've written it. The first book covers the sacrificial system.
Right.
A great deal is written about the sacrificial system. They used to offer sacrifices multiple times per day, every day, and
Yeah.
then special ones on special
Right.
Jewish holidays. And we look at that, and then we look at that last week and those days when Jesus got tried and then crucified and then rose from the dead. And we're like, well, now when we look at the details of the
Yeah.
sacrificial system and the details of the tabernacle, which was where the sacrifices were offered,
Yes.
does that line up with what Jesus went through when he was executed?
Right.
Are there parallels there? How strong are they? So we cover that. And we also cover some of the heroes of the Old Testament, like Moses and Joseph and David and Daniel, and they had some really interesting things that happened to them,
Yeah.
aspects of their characters, which
Right.
were wow. It was really similar to the way Jesus acted towards the people in his life and things that
Right.
happened to him. And again, I asked the question, is that a coincidence or is it more than that?
Right.
But we cover those Old Testament passages and we're like, of all things, why did he cover this aspect of Joseph's life?
Right.
It really wasn't that germane to the history of Israel.
Yeah.
And yet, 4 chapters were devoted to how he reconciled with his brothers.
Right.
And then I look at the New Testament and how it depicts how Jesus wants to reconcile man to God,
Hmm.
through the cross, through what he did. And so, but we look again at at the wording, at the passages, and we see how strong the parallels are there. Then
Yeah.
the second book, I cover prophecy, including the book of Zechariah, including this prophecy, and how strong is the messianic prophecy. This is just one.
Yes.
There's a huge volume of prophecies written, and we look at how strong they predicted what Jesus did when he came 2,000 years ago.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Well, thank you.
What is the new book going to be about? And when is that supposed to be coming out?
So that I'm hoping I'm writing that now, and I've been working really hard. But even when I get done, it'll be done in a few months. Then it needs to go through, as you know,
Hmm.
editing, and there's that's the hard part, but there's still a lot of time and effort. So
Yeah.
hopefully by the end of next year. So that one is about how Adam and Eve were in paradise with God,
Yes.
and now we're in this broken world. And that God had a plan that he's been working all throughout history
Yeah.
to rectify where we are and bring us back to
Hmm.
where we were, which
Right.
I talked about. I've been talking about that already, but he had a plan. And that's in the Old Testament. We see the plan changing and developing and being revealed in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And then the same thing. Then we go to the New Testament and we look at Jesus and we're like, does that fit what this plan God was predicting, was describing
Right.
is? And interestingly, when Adam and Eve decided to rebel, God had a talk with them, and He told them about this broken world they were going to go into. There would be death, there would be weeds, wouldn't be easy to farm anymore,
Right.
so on and so forth. And then He also made a very cryptic prediction about a descendant that Eve would one day have that would crush Satan on his head.
Right.
What did that mean? Uh, we really don't know, other than that he was talking about some kind of a solution.
Yeah.
That was he God already had this plan in mind, but what did that mean? We didn't know. He said that Satan would bruise this person on the heel, but he would crush Satan's head. And interestingly, when Jesus was crucified, he was pierced.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know, probably on the heel, but somewhere in his foot or
Yeah.
ankle.
Hmm.
But and he crushed Satan in the sense of he set humanity free. He
Right.
paid the price of justice. So what I'm saying is right from the very beginning, God had the redemption plan before they even stepped out of the Garden of Eden. He
Right.
already had this plan in place, and it develops throughout the Old Testament. So that's my next book. And
I love it.
it's pretty deep, and I'm researching it and writing it. And so
Oh, I love it.
yeah, that's what's going on with that.
Now, where can people find your other four books?
Well, I'm mainly working through Amazon.
Okay.
So search on my name. The name of the first book is Hesed, Hesed,
Hmm.
which is the Jewish word for loving kindness.
Yeah.
Almost always used in the Old Testament of an otherworldly, great loving kindness, the loving kindness God has for man.
Yes.
Hesed, uh, and my name, and you'll find my book. But and then you'll see the other book, which is named the Mashiach, which
Hmm.
is the Jewish spelling for Messiah. I also have a website, lovingkindnessofadonai.com.
Oh, I love it.
So, I have that, and you can click a button and it will take you to Amazon there for the books. But
Oh,
you
that
can see a little video of me on the website and some other videos of some other Jewish people and Christians and that I know that help me on the books and what they have to say about God and more information about my books.
I love it. Now,
So
now also the social networks. Are you on other social networks too? If people want to contact you through social networks?
I am on Twitter or
Hmm.
X, and yeah, Mark underbar S. I even forget, but I have a very humble presence on Twitter. I don't have
Okay.
many followers, but yeah, you can contact me on that.
Wonderful. Well, this has been outstanding. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you so much for sharing this message. I think it's a wonderful message to to share, and it applies for the Christmas holidays, but it also you could apply it to your life on a daily basis as well. It really gives you something to think about, and really gives you, time to really look at yourself too, and to maybe, say, is this the way Jesus wants me to be? Is this the way, I need to live my life. Would Jesus be happy with me? Because, from studying the Bible and looking at all different religions, it's funny, but they all have the same main meaning, which is love, kindness, to give to others, to be unselfish, it's the principles are the same, is what I'm saying, So no matter, and my grandfather used to say too, all roads lead to one God. And it's so true. There are a lot of interpretations and people have their own versions and stuff, but I love how you said pray on it and it will come to you. And it's so true. And I love, how you mentioned about, the true meaning of Christmas and what it really means, for us as individuals, because sometimes we lose sight. We get so wrapped up with the commercialism, that goes on in our society, but it really is about giving, and not receiving, and that's the same principles in the Bible. It's about giving, not receiving. It's about loving and being loved back. It's about these all these principles, and just having gratitude and not looking to, to be greedy, because greed leads to destruction, and that shows it even in the Bible. It shows how it never really amounted to anything but bad,
Right.
and these things, if we look at ourselves and we look at where we are in life, and we use these principles and we live life accordingly, I think we'll be very happy as individuals, and I think we could also help make the world a better place too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All the religions talk about love and being good and treating
Yeah.
other people well. I think the one thing about well, I don't know, I don't so I just want to talk about Christianity, not the other
Yeah,
ones,
yeah,
just for
yeah.
a second. The thing about Christianity is it's not saying to do that, you should do that for your own sake and for your loved ones in your life. But we fail, and some people fail a lot. And Jesus is saying, he's smiling at you and saying, no, I that's not good and you're hurting yourself, but I paid for it and I love you and I want you to come to me and be forgiven.
Yes.
He doesn't want us to get better and do better and then come to him. He just wants us to come to him for forgiveness. And then he wants to pour love into our lives. And that's how we really change from the inside out, by
Yes.
being loved and accepted completely. And then we become better to
Yes.
others, you know, not by gutting it out,
Right.
but by being loved. So I just want to add that.
And I think that's a beautiful ending to this conversation, because that sums it up to an, it really is about getting forgiveness, and and just being having that love pour into our hearts, and to do better, and but to ask for forgiveness and to receive that forgiveness. And you said it beautifully. You said it beautifully. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your conversation today, and I think it's a great message for the holidays and for every day. Thank you so much.
Thank, thank you, Stacey.
You have a great day.
You too.